It all started with a single missed call. 2:14 a.m., a number she didn't recognize and no name attached. Just a string of digits glowing in the dark. Most people would have dismissed it. But not Melissa. Not this time. Something inside her twisted. A sharp, uneasy knot in her gut. A whisper. This wasn't just a wrong number. That night, she unlocked more than just her husband's phone. She unlocked a secret life. One he'd been living without her for months. Logan had started taking a different route home from work. At first, Melissa brushed it off. "It's just quicker, babe," he'd say, planting a quick kiss on her cheek with that distracted smile he wore too often lately. Less traffic. More peace. She wanted to believe him. But the little things began to stack up like clues in a story she hadn't realized she was living. The scent on his clothes. Too sweet, too unfamiliar. The way he guarded his phone like it held national security codes. Overtime hours that showed up in stories, not in his paycheck. And then there were the excuses, each one stuttering from his lips like they needed rehearsal. Melissa had always been a trusting wife. After 8 years, for dating, for married, she knew Logan's rhythms like her own breath. But now, every time he touched her, it felt like a stranger's hand. His warmth was still there, but it no longer belonged to her. One Thursday evening, the anxiety grew too loud to ignore. She followed him. She hated herself for it. It felt like betrayal. But something deeper, something raw and primal, urged her forward. "You need to know," it whispered. She thought maybe he'd end up at a bar. Or a diner. Maybe just parked at a lookout point, letting off steam. But the sleek apartment building he pulled into was far from casual. Clean lines, quiet street, high-rise windows. Nowhere near his office. Nowhere familiar. Melissa parked across the street, heart drumming in her chest like war drums. She watched him get out, glance around cautiously, and disappear into the building. 35 minutes later, he returned, but he wasn't alone. She was younger, tall, effortlessly beautiful, and she was wearing Logan's old hoodie, the same one Melissa had turned the bedroom upside down looking for last week. Their fingers were tangled together like lovers in a film. Then they kissed. Not sneaky, not hesitant. It was intimate, familiar. Melissa felt her stomach lurch. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She watched the man who swore forever to her give it to someone else. She didn't remember the drive home. Her hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring her to this world. Tears blurred her vision, but she never sobbed. Her pain was too deep for sound. That night, she said nothing. Instead, she played the part women have been playing for centuries. Quiet heartbreak hidden behind steady hands. She inhaled the scent of another woman's perfume on his hoodie. She let him kiss her forehead. She pretended not to hear jasmine slip from his lips in his sleep, but pretending only delayed the fall. The next morning, she skipped work, threw on oversized sunglasses, and wrapped a scarf tightly around her hair. She drove back to that building. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she was sure of one thing. She needed clarity. And then she saw her, Jasmine, standing outside the building, laughing into her phone like the world had never hurt her. Her smile was light, unburdened. She looked in love with Melissa's husband. The ache inside Melissa twisted into something sharper. Anger. That evening, she set the dinner table. Pasta Alfredo, garlic bread, a bottle of wine, just like when they first married. Logan walked in and blinked in surprise. "Wow. What's the occasion?" She smiled. "Just wanted us to have a nice night." They ate. They talked. He lied. So smoothly it almost felt rehearsed. Then, just as he leaned in to kiss her, she whispered it. "Who's Jasmine?" His lips froze, inches from hers. His face turned pale. His fork dropped to the plate, echoing in the silence. Melissa didn't flinch. Her voice stayed steady. "Tell me the truth, or I'll find it myself." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but the words wouldn't come. Just a breath. Shaky, guilty. "You followed me?" he finally choked out. She laughed, sharp, bitter. "That's what you're worried about? Not the fact that you've been building a second life with another woman?" He stood, started pacing, ran his hands through his hair like the truth was a storm he hadn't prepared for. Melissa listened. I did listen, she interrupted. For 8 years, I listened to vows, to promises, to dreams. Now I'm listening to nothing, because you have nothing honest left to say. He slumped back into his chair, defeated, the weight of his lies finally crashing down. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he whispered. It was just flirting at first. I didn't mean to. Don't, she cut him off. Don't insult me with that cliché. Grown men don't accidentally fall into someone else's bed. He looked like he might cry, but Melissa didn't feel pity. Not love, not compassion, just emptiness. She doesn't even know I'm married, he confessed, almost himself. Melissa's laugh was hollow. So you lied to both of us. And then she said it, the sentence that drained all color from his face. I've already spoken to a lawyer. He looked up, stunned. You're divorcing me? You handed me the pen the night you kissed her, she said. I'm just signing the paper. She stood, took her phone, and walked away, leaving him behind with the truth he'd tried so hard to bury. That night, Melissa didn't cry. She wrote. Every thought, every bruise on her heart. Her heartbreak spilled out in ink instead of tears. And in that act of writing, she began to heal. In the days that followed, she didn't shatter. She prepared. Logan started trying. Too late. Morning texts. Washed dishes. Bought flowers from the corner store like love could be taped back together. But Melissa saw it all for what it was, damage control. And she was done pretending. She hired a private investigator. It felt dramatic, even cinematic, but something inside her whispered it goes deeper. 2 weeks later, the investigator slid a folder across the table. Grainy photos, typed notes, and one final bombshell that pulled the last rug out from under her. Jasmine Carter, age 28, not just a co-worker, Logan's subordinate. Asterisk, asterisk. And that changed everything. She wasn't just living in the other apartment. Logan had rented it under a false name and had been paying for it in cash for more than a year. Melissa sat quietly in her car outside that apartment, the investigator's file open on her lap. Her heart didn't race. It didn't ache. It simply hardened, beating steady with the clarity of betrayal. This wasn't an affair. This was an entire life built in shadows, a life he constructed with meticulous care while pretending to love her. That night, when Logan walked into the house, tired and disheveled from what Melissa now knew were rehearsed lies, she didn't say a word. She didn't greet him. Instead, she placed the folder on the table and slid it toward him without emotion. Open it. He did, and the moment his eyes scanned the contents, something inside him collapsed. "You've been tracking me?" he asked, trying to sound outraged. "No," Melissa replied, her voice calm and level. "I've been trying to find the man I married, but it turns out I lost him long ago." He sat down, the weight of the truth buckling his knees. His hands trembled, guilt spilling across his face like ink on water. But Melissa wasn't done, not even close. She stood, looked down at him, the man who had promised her forever, and said, "You don't get to decide when this ends." Then she walked out, leaving behind the silence that had once been her sanctuary. The next morning, in a quiet corner of a coffee shop, Melissa sat face to face with Jasmine. The woman was younger, beautiful, visibly nervous, clearly not used to being summoned by strangers. She looked around the cafe with darting eyes before finally settling on Melissa. "You said you wanted to talk about Logan?" Melissa nodded, her voice cool and steady. "Yes, I think it's time we clear a few things up." Jasmine leaned back slightly, defensive. "Is this about work or something else?" "No," Melissa replied slowly. "This is about my husband." Silence. Jasmine froze. Then the realization struck like lightning. "Wait, husband." Melissa didn't smile. She didn't flinch. "You didn't know, did you?" Jasmine shook her head slowly, eyes wide with shock. "He told me he was divorced. Said it was over." "Of course he did." Melissa pulled the same folder from her bag, the one filled with photos, receipts, and lies, and slid across the table. That's everything. Every detail. He didn't want either of us to know. Jasmine's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her face falling with each truth unveiled. I'm not here to fight, Melissa continued. I'm not here to call you names. That's not my style. Then why? Jasmine asked, her voice small. Why did you want to meet? Melissa leaned in, her tone firm and unshakable. Because I wanted to give you the truth, before it destroys your life the way it tried to destroy mine. Jasmine's voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear. He said he was single, that he'd been married once, but it was over. Melissa nodded slowly. And yet, every night he went home to me, wore a ring, played the loving husband. Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes, her disbelief turning to anger. I feel so stupid. You're not, Melissa said, her voice soft but resolute. He made sure of that. They sat in silence. Two women wounded by the same man, bound by lies they never invited. Finally, Jasmine whispered, What are you going to do now? Melissa looked out the window, her expression unreadable. I'm going to make sure Logan never gets to do this to anyone else again. Back at his office, Logan paced restlessly. Melissa hadn't answered his calls all day, and the silence felt like a noose tightening around his throat. He had no idea about the meeting at the cafe. No clue that the two women he had deceived were no longer strangers, but allies. The trap had been set, and he didn't even see it coming. When Logan returned home that evening, the house was cold and quiet. No lights, no sound, just a single white envelope resting on the dining table. His name written in Melissa's familiar hand. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside weren't just words. It was finality, divorce papers, signed and sealed. Attached was a note, short and scalding. I gave you every chance to tell me the truth, but you chose lies. So I chose peace. You built a second life from deception. I'll build mine on freedom. You no longer have access to this home, my heart, or the version of me that believed in you. Tell your boss you'll need time off. You've got no one left to lie to. Logan collapsed into a chair, his world crumbling around him. He tried to call Jasmine, but she didn't answer. What he didn't know was that she had already packed her things and left the apartment he had hidden her in. She didn't want to be a part of his chaos anymore. Melissa, meanwhile, moved on, quietly, powerfully. She sold the house, took promotion in another city, and built a new life. She traveled, joined a book club, laughed more, smiled brighter. She didn't post about her healing. She didn't need validation, because healing itself had become her victory. 6 months later, Logan saw her at an airport. She was walking with a man, tall, kind eyes, strong presence. She laughed freely, a sound that once belonged to him. Logan didn't approach, didn't dare speak, and Melissa didn't notice him. But even if she had, she wouldn't have stopped. She had already closed that chapter, and in doing so, she wrote the most powerful ending of all.